Thank you, Helen, and good evening, everybody, and good evening to anybody who's tuned in as well on the internet to us this evening. The sheet that I've given out this evening, just to show it maybe up on screen here, basically is a sheet that I prepared just in the last week or two, which shows all of the oral history recordings, all the people that have been recorded and that are stored here in the centre here in Offaly History. We do have another collection up in the archive, which was presented by John Gibbons, who I'm delighted is here tonight as well, on rural electrification. That's stored in the archive. But tonight's one is just focusing specifically on the oral history recordings that are here at Offaly History here in Bury Quay. And if you look at the sheets that's there, on the front of it, you have what's called the Irish Life and Lore Collection. And the Irish Life and Lore Collection comes from a group in Kerry, from Tralee in Kerry. The main driving force behind it was a man called Maurice O'Keefe. He would be the brother of John O'Keefe, the famous Kerry footballer from Tralee. And he basically did a lot of recordings in the Midlands and throughout Ireland. Unfortunately, the poor man died in August of this year, in his mid-70s, having recorded about 4,000 recordings. And we're very fortunate in Offaly that he did a considerable number. So anywhere you see the Irish Life and Lore Collection, which is basically all of page 1 there, and most of the back of page 2, up as far as the Offaly Industrial Heritage, they all belong to his recordings, okay? Irish Life and Lore. As well as that, we're also going to be dipping into the Midlands 103 collection. Albert Fitzgerald, another man, unfortunately, who passed away in the recent years, who recorded a very popular series on radio called Life and Times. We have 25 to 30 of those, and Midlands 103 have recently given us more of those programmes as well. And then finally, at the bottom, we have the start of our own collection. First of all, some recordings from 2010 that I did, arranged by Stephen McNeill at the time, and recordings that I did at the time here in this very room, organised by Stephen. And then more recently, recordings that we've done just this year. That's myself and Sean Rafter, Sean who's here tonight as well, Sean doing the interviews and me just doing the recording bit of it. So that's the list of what we have to date, and with the hope of more to come as well. They're stored, as say, in a number of places. A lot of them are stored as CDs here, and a lot of them are also stored digitally in this, the Historical Centre here. But a lot are on CD, but we have now a digital copy of every one of them. So on the little folder that I have here, you can see the 3 main collections, and later on I'll go into each of those just for you to see where those recordings are and how you might go about listening to them. And one final thing, just before we get to the recordings, I want to mention as well, this is that Offaly History has a SoundCloud page. So it's on the internet. All you have to do is go to Google and enter the words Offaly History and SoundCloud, and it'll take you to this page. And some of the recordings that we have done here are all on view there, and you can listen to them. So the first one we're listening to tonight, actually, Joe Kenny, the entire piece, his entire interview, which was done back in 2010, is there for you to listen to. You could listen to it when you go home or listen to it tomorrow. And there are other recordings there as well. You can see them listed. So there are people like Charlie Finlay, who's here tonight and that we're going to listen to a little bit later on. Sister Oliver, who's also recorded in our pieces tonight. Molly Buckley, who was just interviewed last week. Johnny Flanigan, again, we're going to hear a little bit of his recording tonight. Tommy McCaig, Stephen McNeill himself. Phil O'Reilly just recorded earlier this year. Paddy Bates, a school principal from Clonaslee, but also just outside Burr. He was very big in primary school computing. Joe Kenny, and some recordings that were given to us as well. This is one by Cecilia Warren of her mum, Josephine Warren, talking about Tay Lane. They're all available on the Offaly SoundCloud page. Okay, just go into Offaly History SoundCloud, and they're all there. Okay, so it's just to give you a quick overview of the resources, and I'll tell you a little bit more as we go on. But I want to move now to the actual sound pieces that I've prepared for you. So what I've done is, of the 300 to 350 sound recordings that are there, I've just taken 12 of them. And Tonight we're going to listen to little parts of them, about 3 to 4 minutes recording, just of the recordings of them. Maybe where I went to the recording and a particular episode or something they were saying resonated with me, and I thought it would be a good piece to play for you. So we've put a bit of visuals. This photograph of Joe Kenny was taken in the room here up against that radiator there back in 2010, late 2010. He had retired from the vocational school in town in 1992, so he was 18 years retired. He'd done a bit of work with Midlands 103. He was very much involved with drama, but he started his life in Tullamore in 1954. His first job in Tullamore was the day after the All-Ireland hurling final, when Cork and Christy Ring won his 8th All-Ireland at the beginning of September, the 1st September in 1954. And what he does here in the little piece I'm going to play for you here, when he gets off the train and he walks through the town, he describes here what he saw in Tullamore. So we're taking a trip back to Tullamore now, 70 years back, and he's going to describe what he saw in Tullamore at that time. And no better man to describe it and no better voice to describe it.
1954, I came to Tullamore. I have lived here ever since, working up to the time I retired 18 years ago. When I arrived in Tullamore, I got out of the station and I looked left and I looked right and I looked up the Charleville Road and I saw these trees. There were as many trees on the Charleville Road as there was in the whole of Mayo. Fine trees. That looked good to me. So I headed left downtown through what I know now is Cormac Street. And from the top of the hill, at the end of Cormac Street, looking down the town, I never saw as many cars together. Now, I'd been in Galway, all right, but Galway was different. Galway was a city. But this, for a town, ordinary town, I was flabbergasted with the amount of cars that were there. And I walked down through the town as far as the centre of the town. By the time I had got down that far, I had passed 5 banks. I said, Joe, stay here. This is a prosperous town. It wasn't too far out. Tullamore was the most interesting town. You had a lot of employment in it. You had D. Williams, very big employer on a national basis at the time. P&H Egan, very big employer. And then up just when I come out from the railway station across the road was Salts Ireland spinning mill, where, as I used to tell the young fellas afterwards, they're spinning yarns. Wasn't exactly as literal as that, but you had up to 600-700 people working there at certain times, and you had a lot of other small businesses as well. So Tullamore was a pretty good town to work in, and plenty to do in Tullamore. All sorts of sports catered for. Athletics, the Tullamore Harriers had just started up at the time. Thriving rugby club, thriving soccer club, Gaelic hurling and football club, swimming pool, outdoor swimming pool, but at that time there were very few swimming pools in any small town in the country, and Tullamore was a headline in that regard. It was a tremendous town in that way, and I always felt I was very, very lucky to work here in Tullamore, to get a job in Tullamore. And you had people in Tullamore at that stage when I knew more people than I do now. I could name a person in Tullamore from every county in Ireland. And I'm not talking about the occasional guards from Mayo and Galway and so on, but people from counties like Wicklow, Fermanagh, unusual sort of counties. It was a most interesting town in that regard. It still is. A lot of things have changed in Tullamore now. A lot of these firms that I mentioned are gone. Still, there's quite a lot of employment in it. There's quite a lot of initiative in it. And even to the present day, anybody could do worse than finish up getting their first job in Tullamore.
Okay, it's a good piece, isn't it? It's so well delivered, isn't it? It's so well delivered. And Joe Kenny had this amazing voice, and he was a presenter on radio. The year after he retired, which was 1992, he started working on Midlands Radio, and he used to travel around to all the different towns and parts of Laois, Offaly and Westmeath where they broadcast. and he used to record little pieces for it. And you'd have Joe Kenny, Radio 3, Ilor Tira. He used to always have that little piece to go with it. He was a wonderful man. He was very much involved with drama as well. In the piece that I recorded with him, he talks about the Runners Drama Club. Do you remember that, Michael Dunn? Do you? The Runners Drama Club, they kind of preceded the Tullamore Amateur Dramatic Society, and they had All-Ireland success in the late 50s. I think they won around 57, 58, and had won prizes in the All-Ireland Drama Festival. So he was very much involved with that. He was also involved with the Credit Union. In the early 1960s, he was one of the founding members of the Credit Union in Tullamore as well. So a man who made an immense contribution to the town. He died, unfortunately, in 2016, so 8 years ago. He's gone. But great voice, as you can hear from that, and a wonderful delivery. And a lovely picture of Tullamore 70 years ago to this year. I'm going to move on now. Just the second one I've taken, that is from our own collection, from the history collection. I'd say you can get that on SoundCloud. The next one is one from Albert Fitzgerald's recordings, and it's on the radio, on Midlands Radio 3, and this was his programme Life and Times. We're going back to 2011, and the person we're going to look at is Emily O'Reilly. And Emily is related to Phil Reilly, the undertaker in town, and whom Sean and I were doing interviews with him. He mentioned this, and it triggered me to look up this particular recording because I knew we had it. And Emily O'Reilly at the time was ombudsman for Ireland. And 2 years later, after this recording, she became ombudsman for Europe, and she still is there. The ombudsman is the place where people go to, record if they have difficulties with government or with government agencies and so on. And she's still in that role at the moment. But her early years, she was a journalist. She was the person who broke the story of Anne Lovett back in 1984. She was in the Sunday Tribune offices and got the call from Granard about it. She covered the Eileen Flynn story, another big story as well, as part of her journalism years, which were basically through the late 70s and up to 2003 when Charlie McCreevy appointed her as ombudsman. So this piece I've called A Taste of Tullamore, and you'll see why. She talks about growing up in her early years and her father building the house in Tullamore. They went off to Dublin and off on her career. So this is very much her early part. And this is the only mention of Tullamore in the entire interview. But I thought it was worth listening, particularly for the flavour you'll hear about.
Back in Tullamore, yes, I'm not going to say the year. It is FOIable. It began a while ago. My dad, Seamus O'Reilly, dad was one of 10. He was the youngest in the family. And he grew up, went to school here, started working in the ESB, and dad built the house in Tullamore. I remember going out a few years ago when I had 5 children, and I had my 4th one, and we were down in Tullamore for some reason or other, and I went out to the house in Clonminch, which Dad had built, and knocked on the door and sort of introduced myself and the kids and the people who were living there at the time. I'm not sure whether they're still there now. They were so lovely and very welcoming and all of that. But just looking, I just remember fields, of course, but I think there was something like Clonminch Downs or. But we used to walk to school. From there, Mum pushing the ground, my younger brother in it, and I suppose when those very young memories are very kind of sort of, I suppose, sensual memories. I mean, of the smells around the place, the hay, and my mum grew sweet pea in the back garden. I remember, and so those. I remember, and I've written about this before. I remember I was asked a while ago to contribute to a recipe book, and so I'm not the greatest of cooks. I think. A recipe for mashed potatoes, something like that. Very nice mashed potatoes, I have to say. But I remembered the flavour and the taste of my childhood was Daly's ice cream. Daly's was a little shop which is across the road from my Uncle Philip's, he was the undertaker and the petrol station down on Harbour Street. Yeah. And his son, my cousin Philip, now runs that with his son, my second cousin Philip, who I think was the GAA player. And Daly's had this ice cream. The secret recipe was vanilla ice cream, and I swear to God, I can still taste it. It was just absolutely beautiful. And anyway, when I made this contribution to this cookbook, I fully expected to be inundated with people saying, I have the recipe, but I haven't found the recipe. Yeah, I actually went over to Daly's, very sadly, about 5 years ago, and I asked them if they knew the recipe. Maybe I just imagined it.
I don't think she imagined it, not with a flavour like that. And I was showing that piece to Michael Byrne, and he said not only did they have that ice cream, which seems to have struck a chord with Emily there, but they also had orange juice. Is that right? A very special orange juice you wouldn't get anywhere else. So people remember that, they do. Daly's. And Daly's was near Church Lane, wasn't it? I was asking about that because I'm a blow-in, so I don't know all these places. Yeah. Corner of Chapel Street. Very good. Okay. Very good. Anyway, that's Emily O'Reilly, and that's in our Midlands 103 collection. And they're her memories. Her father, they moved shortly after that, went to Dublin to say. She went to college in Dublin, did an ANCO course for a while, and then went into journalism after that. From there, she's now doing ombudsman since 2003, first for Ireland, and I say now for Europe. Okay, our third piece, our next piece, and this is for me, one of the most interesting recordings in the entire collection that I've listened to so far. I haven't listened to all 340 recordings yet, but this is an amazing story. I borrowed the photo, by the way. There was a website and a book, was there, Humans of Offaly? And this is Martin Furlong, and that's his wife, Katie. And you see the name on the door over there, even though this is in America, Clonminch. Is there on the door side, as well as beware of the dog. But that photograph, obviously, with the American flag, they're over there. And I could have taken countless numbers of extra. I've taken just a 3-minute piece again from it. The interview was about 45 minutes long. And there's an amazing story at the start about his father. His father was a rebel involved with the 1916 and again with the War of Independence, knocked blue trains off tracks, raided post offices. There's a whole story around his father, Tom. Eventually they do work their way, Tom and Margaret, his parents, worked their way to Tullamore. And they initially lived in Putchahone, but they eventually got a house up where the Tullamore Court is now. And I often wondered why they called the Furlong Bar, but John Flanigan did. But the Tullamore Court Hotel was in there where their house was. And I was talking to a friend of mine who lived just a few doors down from them, and he could remember their house and a corrugated roof and where they lived in town for about 60 years. So this is Martin Furlong, and I say I could have picked that piece. He's also probably the most famous name in Offaly football. Offaly footballers have won one minor All-Ireland. Martin Furlong was on the team. They've won 3 senior All-Irelands, 71, 72, 82. He was on all 3 teams. Everybody talks about Seamus Darby's goal in 1982 that won the match and stopped Kerry's 5 in a row. But Martin Furlong saved a penalty that day to Mikey Sheehy. So a wonderful man, a huge man in Offaly GA. And an amazing story as well. Recently, when Offaly won their most recent All-Ireland, which was the under-20 football just in the last couple of years, there was another Furlong on the team. His grandson was on it as well. So the piece I've taken, though, I've called it A Phone Call from America. This starts 6 years after his final All-Ireland victory, so 1988. And he's up in his mother's house, so the house where the Court Hotel is now. He's in that house because his mother has a phone, he doesn't have a phone. And a phone call comes from his brother, who's already in America.
I got a call from my brother one night, and he was buying a pub upstate in New York, up in the Catskills in East Durham. And he was wondering if I was interested in coming out to give him a hand to run it. I said, oh, gee, I don't know. I mean, I took the call at my mother's because I didn't have a phone at the time. And I said, I'd have to talk it over with Katie. He says, okay. He says, I'll call you back tomorrow night. So that wasn't giving me much time. And as I said, went up anyway, and I told Katie, and we sat there at the fire all night looking into the fire and wondering what we do. At some stage of the night, Katie said, you know, she said, we could be here 20 years from now looking into that fire and saying, God, I wonder what would it have been like had we went to America? Why don't we give it a shot? That time in 1988, I didn't see much future here for the kids at that time. I honestly didn't, you know, and I figured it was a good shot for them. Now, Joan was 15 or 16, Ken was 15, yeah, Joan was 16, Ken was 15, I think, and Mark was 12 and Tom was 11. So it was a tough move to make, but I still figured it was the right thing for them to do. Now, we talked it over with Joan and Ken, who were the elder pair, and set up our story. If they didn't like it, like, they could always come back. My mother was alive at the time, and my brother John was alive, so they had they could come back. So that was the deal we made. I didn't ask that to younger guys because they really wouldn't have known what was going on. So we up and off to America. 1988. I went the 1st of May. I had been over and back several times, and I worked the spring out there in '73. Of course, I was in the lucky position that I had my brother there, my two brothers there. My brother Mickey was there as well. So I wasn't going and landing at Kennedy Airport and saying, "What do I do now?" You know. So we were blessed in that sense. Like, you know, we opened the bar for Memorial Weekend up there, and it was a very nervous time for us all because it's seasonal up there. It's only open for 6 months, like, you know, from let's say April to end of November. And first night was very, very, very nervous for us all, you know. We got through it, he's sitting there. Before we left, everybody was of the impression they were worried about us, you know, how we take it. And the kids will be all right, they'll settle in, no problem, kids find their way. But in actual fact, it was the opposite. Kids didn't settle. Now, started school in New York in September. And I was still up the Catskills. They came back down to Nanuet, where we're living now, where my brother lived, and they were enrolled in the school there. And they came up then, my wife came up, and the kids came up about a week and a half later back up to the Catskills. And my son, Ken, who was very, very easygoing fella, like, you know, always a smile on his face, and he came in, and I knew with a look at him the very minute I saw him, I said, "There's something wrong here." So I said to Katie, "What's up?" So she says, he'll want to talk to you. So fair enough. When I finished my shift, and we went down the back playing football with the lads down the back, and I said, "What's the matter?" And I said, "Dad, I'm not happy, I want to go home." I said, "Ooh, problem already." Okay. So I said, "Listen, give me 2 weeks." And I said, "I'll have you in Ireland in 2 weeks. Just give me that, like, sort things out." So fair enough. 2 weeks, he was back in Ireland. Much to my mother's delight, because it broke her heart, me taking her only grandchildren that she had here away, you know. So she was thrilled to bits. So that was grand. He was home, and we ploughed away. And I didn't know until the following spring that Joan wanted to go as well. But she didn't want to tell us. She didn't want to hit me with a double whammy, like the two of them going together. So she held her wish for until the spring. So she went home in that time.
It's an amazing story, isn't it? To think they had made the whole family move. They'd gone to America, set up. He was already out there a few months. And all of a sudden, two of his oldest children, who were still young children, like 15 and 16 years of age, and make that decision for them that they would move back home. And he would stay in the States, and the other two would grow up with them. I think it's an amazing story, and they had great strength of character to see it out, didn't they? All of them, including the children as well. Amazing. I say the good news part of that is that Ken, that son, the 15-year-old, came home and played football for Offaly and played for Tullamore. And his son, most importantly, John, was on that All-Ireland winning team just a few years ago when Offaly won the Ireland. He was playing the centre half-back, John Furlong. I say I kept the Furlong name going. So there is a positive side to it. I think I was talking to, I don't know if they're here tonight, Mary Barry and John O'Connell. John plays music on a Monday night, so maybe that's where he is tonight. But he played music in America, and he said he played in their pub up in the Catskills, and it was a fantastic place. It was a wonderful place to play music, and that the Furlongs were terrific people. And Mary seemed to think that they may have moved from there to Florida. I don't know if people have heard that, but they're not up in that direction anymore. After he finished with the pub, he went into construction and did that for a while. And he's been back to Ireland. This piece was recorded with Maurice O'Keefe. It's in Laois, or in Offaly Series 5. That's where that recording is. It was kind of recordings with people who had left Tullamore and gone abroad. So James P. Cullen, who's in that Series 5, I think was in the army or was in military in New York, and there's 3 CDs on him. Martin Furlong, Father Michael Kelly, who was abroad in Africa, I think, and Terry Dolphin or Mary Hennessy, one of them was in Argentina. So that's what that series, Offaly Series 5 was. It was a lot of kind of Offaly people who had gone abroad. But that whole interview with Martin Furlong is really interesting. He talks about some of the jobs he had when he started. He didn't do his leaving cert, and when he was in secondary school, he started doing. He was a messenger boy for Wakefield's shop. Do people remember Wakefield's shop? down opposite the Bridge House there, around the Bank of Ireland building, as you know it. He was messenger there for Wakefield's. What was the name of the man who owned Wakefield's? Abraham, was it? Dick Abraham, yeah. And then he used to also go in on a Friday to sell fish and chips in the, I'll get this wrong, the Capri Cafe, is it a Capri? Where Eddie Rockets is now. He used to go in and do a lunchtime shift in there teaching it. All that is covered in the interview. It's an amazing interview and a really amazing man. His lovely chats about the camaraderie with the team as well, with the Offaly teams, well worth checking out, and loves coming home to meet them and catching up with them. And I know his own fellow teammates from those teams were really sad to see him going to America because we were losing the link with such a valuable player of the team. Anyway, that is Martin Furlong. Let's move on. And the next one, this is an interesting one again, a bit like the Martin Furlong one. I went to the Martin Furlong one and expected that I was going to extract a piece about football. I went to this one and I was sure I was going to extract a piece about Boland's Lock. But there's a slightly different story here. This is Anne Boland, or Anne Martin. And she describes here basically where she moved in with her aunt, Nan Boland, and lived there rather than live at home. And she talks about that in the story. Talks really lovingly about Nan, and there's quite a lot in the interview. It's only a short interview on the CD. I think it's only about 20 to 25 minutes long. And she talks about Nan coming into town and selling butter and selling bread. She talks about that. She talks about her jumping into the canal to save a young lad, or going down a ladder into it. She talks about how brave she was because she was the first female lock keeper. And often you'd have boatmen calling late at night and knocks that would terrify them. But Nan was quite the brave person getting up and checking out any kind of noise at night time. So she goes into all that detail. But the bit I focused on is just her relationship there and a little bit about her family as well. Her family wanted her to move home and she's staying with her aunt in the lock. This is Anne Martin.
I'm here with you, the niece of Nan Boland. Now, you spent a lot of time with her, growing up with her.
I did. I spent the best part of my young days, school days with them, until I went to my nursing career in 1959. Even though I was up and down to my mother's house a lot, but I was really reared at my aunt's house. Just before my sister was born, it was in 1943. And I spent the best part of my life, as I said, up there and enjoyed every minute of it. They fell in love with me and I fell in love with them.
What do you remember about the house itself?
Well, I had my own room, I remember, upstairs. And I remember Nan getting it papered with lovely wallpaper with baskets on it. And I remember lots about the house. I had happy memories in the house, happy and sad, because when Granny died, Granny died in 1954, and I was in an untoasted play at the time. I remember coming home and seeing Granny in the couch, thought she was alive. And I just said to her, move over, Granny, won't you? Poor Granny was dead the whole time. Granddad died before that, and they're in their 70s. But I've happy memories of running in and running out. And granted, it was a very secluded life for me because there was no children up there at the time. I was very much on my own. And it was a quiet life, a very private life.
Oh, why did you choose to go up there rather than stay at home here?
I didn't choose. They chose for me, really, in a sense that they just wanted a young person with them, I think.
But you had no problem with that?
Oh, not at all. Oh, no. There was a time when Mammy came up to me, she said, I think it's time you came home now and leave your answer. I said, no, I don't want to go home. I was getting everything, I said. I was getting all nice clothes, and I was getting a bit of pocket money, and it was brought everywhere. Everywhere they went, I went. We brought on holidays, and all those type of things, which I suppose my mother could have done too, but with 3 other children at home, she wouldn't have been able to, and money at that time wasn't.
It was not.
No, and then they gave me schooling, you see, they paid for my secondary schooling and sent me to secondary school and paid for my schooling. And I had music lessons and dancing lessons, all those things, little novelties.
Which you wouldn't have.
Which I wouldn't have had. No, which I wouldn't have had. And then they sent me to nursing, and I went for nursing at the time.
But did you have brothers and sisters?
I have 2 brothers and a sister.
Were they jealous that
Of course they were. The Kathleen used to often come up and stay with me, then my only sister. And so she used to come up and stay the other weekend, and it was lovely. And then she'd be brought everywhere. But then she'd have to come home, and I wouldn't. It was a lovely life, but it's only now I realise it was a lonely life for me, even though I enjoyed it. You know, I went to school and I came home, went to my music lessons and all that type of, but it was lonely. It was a lonely life. But having said that, I wouldn't have known any different, you know, but I enjoyed it.
The favourite line from that, I could hear you all reacting. She had to go home, but I didn't. And it's a very good thing, but often at the time, I suppose, maybe families who didn't have children often took a member of their family in at the time. It was nothing unusual. I remember being farmed out, particularly if my mother was having a child, out to stay with the relations for a while. It happened to us all, I'm sure, at the best of times as well. But I thought it was a lovely piece. She does go into a lot of detail on Nan and her life at the mill as well. But I say it's a very short piece. That's part of 3 recordings that were done. Maurice Keefe again, Irish Life and Lore. It's in series 2, I think. And you have 3 recordings, one after the other. The first one is with a man called P.J. Gorey. Am I pronouncing his name properly? Is it Gorey or Gary? Gary, is it? He calls him Gorey. PJ Gary. He interviews him first. Then he interviews Nan Boland herself. But Nan's voice, it's very hard to work out what she's saying, and PJ is there trying to give a handout, but it's a difficult recording to listen to. And then Anne is the third of the 3 recordings, so they're all covered in the series. Well worth to listen at the same time.
I walked into school with.
Did you?
I did.
Well, of course, you were coming from that neck of the woods. You were
I
coming.
knew them all. I knew the grandfather and grandmother were all around that time.
Very good.
Yeah.
Very good. Okay. And she's say Anne Boland. Liam Boland would be a sister as well, isn't it? Or brother, isn't it?
Brother.
Yeah. And she mentions a sister Kathleen as well. Yeah.
Yeah, she sadly passed away.
All right. Okay. And Anne obviously went from there into the nursing. I have 2 more pieces to play for you, and then I'll just go back just to show you 1 or 2 of the things of the resources that we have, and then I have 6 more recordings, so I'll move on fairly rapidly. This next one here, you have 2 people. You have Ollie Clancy and Seamus O'Connor. This is taken from number 8, which is all to do with Tullamore Jew. And in this one, they're talking about the time and motion man, who was a man called Willie Ralph, and how time and motion worked, and the effect it had on the employees, which wasn't always very positive. This actually is from Ollie's interview, but Seamus is there with him, and he chirps in every now and again. It's mainly Ollie's response, but it's great. It's in the Tullamore Jew series, and well worth a look as well.
Each one of the brothers had his own responsibility for different areas. So, who were you answerable to? Which one?
Initially, I was answerable to Willie Ralph, who was kind of Mickey Williams' right-hand man. And I'd say from about the mid-70s onwards, I was reporting to Edmund.
He was the time and motion man.
Willie was the time and motion man, yeah. He eventually became a group director. He was one of the first, he was first actually, himself and Joe Connell were the first 2 non-family directors. Yeah. And that would have been, say, something in the late 60s.
Can you describe to me what time and emotion?
Time out, I was an industrial engineer. I did a bit of it myself. You had to stand over people with a pencil, with a stopwatch. And, you know, where a lot of us come up was that any time there was a bit of a bonus when we used to cluster the stout, we put that little packet, the 6 packs of stout in the little cardboard cartons. The fella that was in the main bottling house just taking the stuff on or off the production line was paid his wages full stop. But the girls in the cluster area would have had their basic pay plus a little bonus for the number of clusters they were doing. And we'd have to time them and say, you know, get the standard, I don't know, let's say it was 40 a day. So you didn't get, you just got your normal wages if you were doing 40, but anything over 40 then you got your little bonus for it. Yeah. And that's where the time and motion man came in. But it's the same as any bonus or incentive scheme. That was the time and motion man Monday function really. But people resented the time and motion man around the place because they always thought that the guy was focusing on him in particular. You know, whereas it wasn't needed because time and motion was the basis of all bonus schemes. That's, you had to have time and motion before you could put in a bonus scheme. And people wanted a bonus scheme, but they didn't particularly want to be timed.
Girls in the whiskey store, they were timed. Like Willie Ralph, who was the time and motion man at the time, he'd be behind him, as Oliver said, was a watch, you know, pen and paper. And Willie said, no, girls, I'm not here to do you any injustice or any harm. I'm here to time you. And all the girls would get sort of worked up at this. So they timed them with the labelling a bottle. And then
we say it was 10 seconds or something. So the girls are half afraid they want them to do it for 2 seconds.
But that surely put pressure then, didn't it, on the staff?
It probably did, but you see, at the end of the day, there was always going to be a few bob extra. You know, so the incentive. The incentive was there, yeah.
Okay. I like that he makes the mistake time and emotional, but I think a lot of the workers did get emotional about the fact that they were being timed, so it was kind of appropriate. That piece, I say, is from Ollie Clancy's thing. He started working, I think, in 1963, and he was there for about 23 years in the firm, and then he went out on his own, I think, dealing with a lot of the pubs around town. But his interview is very entertaining, and he's able to list off. He was a clerk in the maintenance room, and he used to do a lot of the wages. And he's able to list off at the start of the interview all the people who were paid and how the wages were worked. And he lists them off straight off the top of his head as though he was doing it yesterday. He said, I was doing this for 20 years. He said, I can recite it like a poem from school. It's a very good interview and well worth listening to as well. Well, we're talking about the beer and talking about the drink. I'll stick with that now. And this next one is also to do with Williams's. I call this Misty Lodge because when I looked up this man's obituary, I noticed his home address was Misty Lodge. That was his address at home. Bill Jaffrey, who I know has done lectures for the Society there before from years back, and they're up on SoundCloud as well. The piece that I picked for you is talking about Irish mist, and when they went to export Irish mist from Tullamore for the first time, particularly out to America and to places that were an awful lot warmer than Ireland, a few little hiccups appeared and they had to sort it out. So here he is talking about it, Bill Jaffrey. His dad came to Ireland first. William Jaffrey came, I think, in 1914 or 15. And then Bill started working in the 40s in Williams's. Obviously, Irish mist came along a little bit later than that. But here he is anyway, talking about Irish mist being exported.
There were some scary moments, I can tell you, in the business, because we were never in the export business before where Irish mist is concerned, and we assumed that what applied here in this country would apply everywhere. And when we went into the American market, we got a phone call one day to say that some Irish mist bottles were popping their corks in Texas and in Illinois. And shivers went down our spine. At that same time, Smithwick's ale was having secondary fermentation in bottles all over the country. And some foreign yeast had got into the bags down in Kilkenny and was causing the secondary fermentation. And because we were using honey, we began to worry, was there secondary fermentation taking place in Irish mist? And I was shipped up to the Albert College up in Glasnevin. The Professor Walsh, the man I went to, we had sweated for about 7 days before he came back to say, no, you could not have any fermentation because the alcohol content was too high.
Yeah.
It was such a high that you could not have any secondary fermentation. But the problem was that we did not leave enough space in the bottle for expansion. And the pressure built up and blew the corks as such. So that was something we had to then go back and get the bottle adjusted in such a way that it looked the same. And gave the vacuity or extra space in the bottle. So what the bottle company did, was put a punt in the bottom of the bottle that compensated for a reduction in volume that we put in.
Oh, I see. Yes.
Legally reduced the volume because we had it on the label the correct amount. But that was how that was learned. And we were naive enough to think also that the bottle had sealing wax on it. That was fine here, but again, in places like Tesco's, and that the sealing wax
would melt.
And did melt. That was a disaster as well. So we learned bit by bit going along, like, you know. But I lost many pounds in the process, I can tell you, as such, like, you know.
That's Bill Jaffrey. You know what I mean by the punt at the bottom of the bottle. You know, the thing you put your hand up to it at the bottom to arrange for the space in it. A very interesting man, a lovely speaker as well, I have to say that. Just before I open up just the next one, just to pause this for a second here. I just want to go back to the folder just where I showed you these. So this kind of ties in with the sheet that you have here as well. So if you look at the Irish Life and Lore collection, so we're talking about Maurice O'Keefe's collection, the Kerry collection from Reilly. You'll see if I open up that folder here, we have 10 series in that. And the first 4 are by far, you know, the ones with the most recordings. There are about 50 or 60 in each of the first 4. Series 5, I say, just has about 5 to 6 recordings. The same with number 6. The Bord na Móna collection has a lot of recordings. There's nearly 30 recordings in it, but not a lot of people from Tullamore in it. I didn't find a lot of interest in that. I probably need to go back. Tullamore Jew has 10 recordings in it, including 4 with some of the Williams family. Very well worth a listen. The Heritage one is a very recent one, and it's recorded talking to people out in Kilcormac. Sean Craven is on it, another man from the teaching, Tom Daly's in it, and there's a lot of people in that. Now, what I've done with each of these is, supposing I take, let's say, the 4th series. When you open up that folder, these are on the computers inside if people want to come in and listen to them in here. When you open up the folder, there's 4 things in each. This is like a checklist I've done to show whether there's CDs of it or whether there's a digital file of it. But we have digital files of them all at this stage. The other thing is that Maurice O'Keefe sometimes made a catalogue available with them as well, where he gives a kind of an overview. And this is what you get in the catalogue. You get a list of all the people that are in the recordings. And it just gives you a little pen picture of them all with a photograph of them all as well. So that is in each folder. It's more detailed than what I give. I've just given you the names, but in the catalogue, he gives a little write-up on each of them as well. So we have a catalogue for each of the 10 sets of recordings there. So you can go in and find out a little bit more about them before you go to listen to them. Here are the MP3s. We have digitized every single recording at this stage. So you can see them all there. If you click on any of those, they will come up as MP3s. You can listen to them. Unfortunately, you can't listen to them on the internet. You can't access these from home. And the last thing that we have here are audio transcriptions. This is where people have sat down in the past and listened to the recordings and then have typed up. And we have full transcriptions of a considerable number. I would say of the 400 or 300 recordings here, we have at least 200 transcriptions done. And the good news is that with the transcriptions, the latest developments that you hear about in AI at the moment, artificial intelligence, it's now possible to go to a website. I'll just show it to you very quickly because I've used it lately. There's a company called Speechmatics. And just to bring it down here, see if I can find it here. Speechmatics, see this here? I won't bother going into the site, but it's possible at the moment. They allow you 4 hours per month where you can take a recording that you have done. So supposing you've recorded an interview with somebody, or we want to use one of the recordings here, you can drop it into their software, give it 3 minutes, and it will cough out 12 to 15 pages of typed text where it has transferred the audio file to text. I did it just in the last week, and I just want to show you what it looks like when it comes out. This is a recording that Sean and I did with Tommy McCaig, and just to show you the accuracy of it, I literally put in the file that said this will take 3 minutes, pressed the button and said transcribe, and that's all I had to do, free of charge with this company, Speechmatics. Here we are today, 2nd of October 2024, Offaly History Centre. You got the spelling of McCaig wrong, okay? With Tommy McCaig. Welcome, Tommy. Maybe you tell us about your life, where you were born. Thanks much, Sean. I was born in County Galway, Kiltormer, the townland of Sheepswalk. It's all accurate. The accuracy of it, I'd say, is 90-something%. It's quite amazing. And we have that, you know, anybody has that facility. You have that at home now. If you dictated something, or if you had something that was recorded, or a speech or something, you can convert it to text as though you had a typist beside you doing it. It is quite amazing. And any of the recordings we have done this year now, I've used that to get a transcription. You still have to go back and spend a bit of time going through it. There are 12 pages in it, but all the initial first draft typing has been done for you. It is quite amazing, quite amazing. Just wanted to show you that, just to be aware what's there. I say we have done it with some of the recordings. Now, let me go back to our sound file, because I still have 6 to play and I'm conscious of the time here, so I'll rush through them. This was an interview I did with Sister Oliver here in recording, and she's talking about the secondary top. I'll explain it to you. I'd never heard of it, even though I'm involved in primary teaching all my life. I'd never heard of a secondary top, but I'll let her explain it for you here. She was a presentation sister in Killina, born in Dublin. Her parents died very young and she moved to Rafters in Tullamore in Harbour Street when she was 13. She had a brother and sister as well. They came down, educated, and after, let's say, when she was 18, she became a presentation sister in Killina. Used to often visit the Historical Centre here and attended lectures as well. A very popular lady. And she came in to be interviewed by myself back in 2010-11. And this is what she was talking about. I just took this piece about secondary top.
When I finished my training in Kerrisford, I came home and I started to teach, and I was given a 4th class, and they were excellent girls. I suppose I had about 14 or 15 would have been the number in the class, but some of them were very clever and did very well later. After that, we taught all the subjects, of course, and that went on. And I continued that class. I kept that class up to 6th, 4th class, 5th class and 6th class. I had them for 3 years. And then in 1948, Sister Patrick was with me and we started the secondary top. The secondary top was a continuation of schooling in the primary school. In 6th and 7th class, continued on and did the inter-cert and the leaving cert. But we were under the primary department all the time, and we had an examination every year from the inspector. He came to see that everything was going on all right, and they were always very satisfied with us anyway. That continued on, and then we discovered we didn't realise we needed so much space. We started in a small room top school, as we say, it was upstairs. And then it was all right when we had the first year, and then we had a second year, and then we had a third year. We had to move downstairs, and we had, for a long time, we had the whole first year, second year, up to leaving cert, all in the one room. And there were 3 teachers teaching in that room, and we had different subjects. And we say it must be very difficult. It appeared to be very difficult, but it worked. And the one good thing about it was that if any of us was called out, there were always teachers there present, and the children continued on. And the room wasn't very big, but we managed because the numbers were small. In the beginning, in the first leaving cert class we had, there were only two pupils who did that. That was in 1953. We took a good many subjects. We had the X subjects: Irish, English, French, History and Geography, Maths, and we did accountancy and commerce and cookery, domestic science. That was another subject that we did. That continued, and we had different inspectors for different subjects. As we went along, children, they did very well. They all passed anyway in the beginning. It was very good, the numbers began to grow. Then it got bigger, and we had in 1960, about 1960, the bishop asked us to take boys, and so that was something we were dreading. We were wondering how we were going to manage boys, but we found that they wakened up the girls. The girls were very, very slow to answer anything, but when the boys came, they were very smart, and the girls smartened themselves up then. They were very willing to chance an answer too. So, but they did very well. The 2 first boys were Michael Dunn and Declan Cooney. Michael Dunn went on and became a principal in a big Dublin school later on. But he was a great boy, great maths teacher.
She was an amazing lady. She lived to be almost 100. She died she died about 2 years ago, wasn't it, 2022? And she was born in 1923, so she was a few months shy of 100 years of age. But the secondary top was a marvellous thing, because I remember listening to some of the other recordings about people who grew up and they said there was no secondary school in our time. Joe Kenny didn't have secondary school in Ballyhonus, where he grew up. He had to go to Ballinsloe for it. So having the secondary top in Kilnab was a huge service to the area, and the nuns did great work there. It's a real tragedy they're gone from there completely. Anyway, that's Sister Oliver that I met here. The next one, Tony, I see her in the back of the room here. This is John Flanigan, who just passed away this year, back in May. And I picked out this piece again. This is a recording I did in this room with Johnny back again around 2010-11. I was doing a project for the Athlone Education Centre at the time, and they wanted us to chapter out people's lives into 5 days of the week. So you'd play a 10-minute piece for the children in the classroom every day. That was the idea behind it. I don't think it made it to the classroom, but Johnny came in. He was one of about 8 people who took part in the project. And he talked about his primary schooling. He talked about leaving school then when he was about 13 or so on. And when he was just 15 or 16, he started in construction. And one of the first people he worked for was Sonny Duffy. And he talks about being a raw recruit. I love the fact that the man who had such a distinguished construction career in a wonderful company in Flanigan Construction, that he would talk a little bit about himself and the mistakes he made as a young raw recruit, particularly a man who built the Tullamore Court Hotel and all these fine estates around town that he could talk about as well, but the important lesson he learned as a young recruit. Give a listen.
I served my time at Duffy in Hebron. The one I used to work most was Sonny Duffy and Liam Duffy. I started to serve my time on the 2nd of February 1947. And I was a raw recruit in the construction business. And my knowledge was limited, very limited. But I fitted in to the company and the organisation quite well. And I did what I was told most of the time, and that paid off for me. I felt that the support of my seniors that worked in the business with us, skilled and unskilled workers. I felt that I was always sort of with them, part of them. And, we had many experiences, and I used to do ordinary work, unskilled work. And now and again, I got an opportunity, maybe in the first year, to do a little bit of plastering. And eventually, of course, the time came when I was told that I was ready to go ahead and plaster away. But there was one incident which I often do think of now, bringing his memory back. Sonny Duffy said to me one day, he said, we were building a house on the Archival Road. And he said to me in the morning, we'll flash those chimneys up there now. That meant putting the lead around the chimneys. So we got out the roll of lead, and again, Sonny said to me, we'll cut off this piece 9 inches by so on, and we'll cut 12 of them or 14 of them or whatever it was. And Sonny was telling me what to do, and I was helping him to do it, but we worked away all day and we got a lovely job doing those chimneys. And about 10 to 6 in the evening, there was a lot of little small pieces of lead around the roof where we could split it off and so on. And Sonny said to me, you can take down them pieces of lead now and put them into the shed. So I took down. Not only did I take down the little pieces of lead, but I took down all the lead. So when I came in the next morning, I didn't realise I'd done any harm. He said to me, oh, in the name of God, what did you do yesterday evening after I left? So I looked at him, and I didn't really know what he meant, but he wasn't long about it. He says, you can get up from that bloody roof and you can put all that lead back on your shelf. And when it's finished, I'll have a look at it. And that's an order. So I got up and let back on. It wasn't too long at it, probably a couple of hours. But he got up anyway, and he said to me when he was finished, he says, you picked up a good bit yesterday. You were watching what I was doing. So that was a sort of a bit of a crossroads, if you like. I did something wrong, but I made it right the next day. And he appreciated what I had done the next day. He appreciated that I was watching what he was doing, and that I was able to do what he had done the day before. And I got on the right side of Sonny from there on. We worked together a lot. He was a very, very skillful tradesman.
It's a lovely piece, isn't it? Yeah. And I remember I had prompted him before that this was for school children, that children were going to be listening to this. And it was basically him telling his life story, but the fact that he would tell that story against himself almost, but as a lesson in life to youngsters who might be listening to it, I thought it was lovely. Anyway, John Flanigan, the late John Flanigan, who died in May of this year. The next clip is Richard May. a very young-looking Richard May there. Michael Byrne gave me the picture here. And Richard May, born in Dublin, the family moved around an awful lot when he was young. His dad was a Church of Ireland rector. They moved to Burr when he was very young. They went from there to Castlepollard, from Castlepollard to Athlone, Newbridge. So they moved all over the place. They also, Richard himself went to boarding school when he was 10. He went to Wilson's Hospital in Mullingar for a couple of years. And then from there he went to Mountjoy, as it was called at the time, in Dublin, boarding school. Went from there to Surrey in England to study photography. And then his first job was in Lowestoft out on the eastern side of England, and then went on cruise ships and travelled all over the world. So he was 30 years of age by the time he come back to Ireland and decided to set up a business. And here he's talking about his struggles when he came to Tullamore. I'll say no more than that.
So what did you do then work-wise after your trip to India?
After that, I came back to Ireland, but I thought at the time I would probably get a job in England. I didn't see much prospect of a job in photography here, but I came home here for, again, a bit of a break. I was looking around for something to do, and somebody suggested to me one night, why don't you open up a photographic studio in Tullamore, of all places?
And
I came over, had a look around Tullamore, saw there was nothing else going on here, and decided to do it.
what year was that, Richard?
1977.
So 1977, at that, what age were you at that stage, to be fair to us?
I would have been 30.
You got your 30s, you arrived back here, 1977 to set up. What was it like setting up a business in those days?
Obtaining a premises and opening the door wasn't very difficult. I had been out of the country for some time and had assumed that you could, if you were setting up a business, well, of course, you could get things like telephones.
Mm-hmm. Right.
That was my first rude awakening. There was a 4-year waiting list for telephone lines at the time.
4 years?
4 years was about average. I made my application. I naively assumed, well, yes, it takes 3, maybe 6 months. I remember meeting the late Oliver Flanigan, who was at that time Minister for Defence. This was the tail end of the Fine Gael government, and Oliver shook me warmly by the hand and said, it was great to see new business opening up. How could he help me? And I said, well, Minister, perhaps you could help me get a telephone. Oh, it's ridiculous. You couldn't run a business without a telephone these days, of course.
So I got it in 2 years.
We won't go too far into Oliver's, but needless to say, I didn't get the phone.
Right.
There was a telephone engineer at an office up in the Tanyard at the time. I think it was little more than a prefab, and I used to pay him visits on a fairly regular basis. And one day he turned around and he was sitting at a desk with filing cabinets behind, and he pointed at a big pile of brown folders on a shelf behind him. And he said, do you see those folders there? Those are the applications for 1972.
That's
This was 1977.
different world, isn't it?
I eventually got wired in through the good offices of the late Frank Reilly, who was a wonderful printer at premises up at the back of, I think, O'Donoghue's bakery up near the Kilbacon Bridge. And I was friendly with him, and he said, well, what I can do, I will get you an extension from my switchboard. So for 2 or 3 years, I was operating on an extension from a switchboard half a mile away across the other side of town, which could be put in 2 days.
Seems ridiculous, doesn't it?
But I couldn't get my own line.
1977. We've come a long way with telephones, haven't we? And that was just before the Albert Reynolds era. I remember Albert Reynolds, he was assigned to Post and Telegraphs, I think, around in the Fianna Fáil government around that time. And there were a lot of changes did come in over the next 5 or 6 years. But they were still in the dark ages there. It's amazing to think you can walk into a mobile phone shop now. You can be chatting with Australia in 5 minutes. And this man couldn't get a phone line for 4 years. Anyway, it's a good piece. And 1977 is not that long ago either, I'd like to think. Okay, next up. This is a man who's sitting in the front row here with us, Charlie Fennelly. Charlie. And Charlie very kindly agreed to be interviewed just in May of this year. And I want to say a huge thank you to Sean Rafter as well. Sean rang me after a meeting of the historical Offaly history here one night and said, I hear you're doing a bit of work around oral histories and so on. I'd love to help out. And he had a lot of knowledge of the town. So he has been doing a lot of the interviews with me. We've interviewed 4 or 5 people and they're all available online in SoundCloud. Sean is here tonight with us as well. And this is a piece we did with Charlie. Who talks about his early life in Cole Hill and running in out to school along the canal, meeting up with Anne Martin and those, as you heard him say earlier on tonight. And then did a bit of work with John Flanigan as well, who was a relation of yours. and then did a small bit of work in salts with the was it a time they were putting new machines and so on like that, and some of the air conditioning, so was it?
A job with John Fort putting in air conditioning
Right.
for those machines.
All right, okay. So anyway, bit by bit, 1967, was that your first year in the railway station, 1967?
67.
1967. So here Charlie paints a picture of the transport section in Tullamore railway station, 1967. Let's give it a listen.
I worked in the goods store in Tullamore. It was a busy store. There was 3 main doors, and the Tullamore door, all the Tullamore sundries and goods for the shops, all was stacked and ready for the delivery downtown. And another door was for the Aidan Barry service, and the Banner service was the next door. A lot of sugar came for Williamses and Lumleys, and later Williams Egan's as well, and Williams and Egan's amalgamated, and they got all their sugar delivered came by rail to the sugar store, and the sugar store was specially designed and with air aboard for keeping out the dampness, and so that the sugar would be in good condition. We were attached to the traffic department. Billy Harvey, Johnny Sheridan, and Bobby Longworth, and Liam Reilly, and Jimmy Cantwell, all those worked in the traffic. Also Johnny O'Reilly worked on Stephen Lowbridge. They all worked in the traffic department attached to the goods store. There was 3 horses and drays doing the deliveries downtown. Jack Cassidy was one, Barney Elf and Archie Conway. Then Hughie Bracken had do some deliveries. If one of those boys were missing, like Hughie would fill in for them and do the deliveries downtown. And then the lorry for Banner was Billy O'Reilly and Paddy Kelly. That lorry would cover Clara and Ballycumber, Ban, Belmont, Shannon Harbour, all on the Banner and outside the Banner as well. DSB and Portamona as well. There was just 2 trains in 1967. There was a branch train running to Port Harrington. That train would pick up passengers in Tullamore around 9:30, and it'd run to Port Harrington. The engine, there was only one cab on the engine or the locomotive at the time, and that would go in on a turntable in Port Harrington and face for back, and it'd pick up whatever passengers were waiting at Port Harrington for Tullamore, Clara, Athlone, take them back, and the stop that year the timetable were stopping the Connemara. It was train from Galway to Dublin, but they decided to stop it in Tullamore for 2 minutes and pick up passengers, but to take no parcels or goods to not delay the train. All the parcels and goods came in on the branch train from Port Harrington. There was just one running line in Tullamore at the time for up and down trains. The rest of the yard was designed for goods traffic.
Okay, and that's Charlie's piece. Okay, a lovely piece as well. I think the one I love about that is to memory, Charlie's memory for all the names of all the people who worked there. Sorry, I'll just go back a bit here if I can. Just a little bit here. We mentioned the people who did the recordings, and this man here is a man called Jim Kenny. The Midlands 103 were all done by Albert Fitzgerald, and the Irish Life and Lores were done by Maurice O'Keefe. They're the 3 people we should kind of keep in mind tonight as well. They're all unfortunately no longer with us. And this man, Jim Kenny, did a lot of recordings for Offaly History, and a lot of his recordings are in Irish Life and Lore Season 1. Maurice O'Keefe took the tapes from here and digitized them all and put them onto CD. That's how they ended up in the Irish Life and Lore collection. But here Jim Kenny is interviewing a carpenter. a man who grew up on a farm called John Jack Egan, who I think eventually ended up in Tullamore. Anybody know him? I don't know. Do you know him? Jack Egan, yeah. And I'm not sure it's the same guy. This guy lived out in the island initially and was on a farm and then took up carpentry. But he was interviewed by Jim Kenny anyway. Maybe you might recognise him from what he tells. But listen for the money he earned for the job he does for Monaghan's. One of the final pieces he mentions is working for Monaghan's construction company, and he's doing some work out in Glasgow, in near Screggan. And the work he does for 5 weeks and what he gets paid, it's near the end. Just give a listen.
I never intended to be in my life as a farmer. My ambition was woodwork. And it wasn't easy in those days. There was no tax. We had the occasional manual class would be in a barn or something, or you'd learn how to use tools and maybe make an article or so. It was there I got the first introduction to carpentry. It was very, very useful later on, because there was a man, he was from Furlong, who was the instructor, Tom Kinney, and Tom Kinney knew all about carpentry. So that helped, and then I kept on working on the land as much as possible, but then I got to go to the Monaghan to Paddy. It was hard to get your nose in anywhere.
Very hard to get an apprenticeship
at that time.
Yes.
And even though I had a fair knowledge of it at this time, still it was only the start of the building that time, and there was all house being built for a grant of £80. But anyhow, I got studied 3 years with Paddy, and so then most of the time, the early stages, I didn't get any money.
Yes, the apprentice in those days wasn't paid.
In the later months or year, I was getting 35 shillings a week. And
what age would you be by that stage?
I was about 21. But anyhow, I decided to go further afield and try somebody else. So I went to the Monaghans, Raha, and money-wise, it didn't make a whole lot of difference. I can just tell you one instance. The first job I did for Monaghan was in a place called Glasgow, just above Killanall. It was a land commission house for a man named Pat Fletcher. And I did the house, I roofed the house on my own, made all the windows and doors, put them in, put down the boarded floors and all the rest of it. And I was putting the glass in the windows after 5 weeks when Jimmy Monaghan came and gave me a £10 note. So that was the reward for 5 weeks' work.
Practically building the house on your own.
Yeah.
Yes.
And that house is still there, and that hip roof is still there, and there have been 4 generations of people lived in it since. Yeah.
It's value for money, so.
Yeah.
That puts all talk of bicycle sheds to shame, doesn't it? 10 quid for all that work. Was it amazing, isn't it? For the Monaghans. Sorry? We won't get him near the Children's Hospital, no. All right, final piece. This is the last one. And if you were to walk out our front door here and just look across the canal to Clontarf Road, this you would see number 66, I think it's on the way as you go down to Dolan's, just around the bend there. And this is John Butler and his wife Eileen. The piece we're going to hear is Eileen speaking. But John lived all his life in Tullamore, lived in number 9 initially. He grew up in number 9, Clontarf Road. But this is where he ended up with his wife. Unfortunately, after this recording was done in 2008, and Eileen died the year after it in 2009. And John since passed away in 2014. But he talks a lot about playing in O'Brien's Field and in Carney's Field and growing up and the games they played. His interview is very interesting, and he worked for Williams's. her story is also very interesting. She grew up in Moat. Her family were very poor. And there's one very sad part of it where she looks to her mother and father. She has the chance to stay on education, and the nuns have told her that they have a place in a boarding school for her at age 16 or 17 if she'd stay on. And she was a very good student and loved school, and her friends were carrying on. And she wants to carry on. But the nuns said to get into the boarding school, she had to buy her own bed and she'd buy her own uniform. And she went home to her parents and they shot it down straight away. They just didn't have the money for it. She describes her mother, with the tub of water and the sunlight soap, the bar of soap and the washing board. And she goes into a lot of detail, and the hand-me-downs. They were a very poor family, but they still made way. She came from a family of 7. He came from a family of 7. And at the time of the interview, I think they were both the last in their family. But give a listen. I've called it Black 47, but I won't tell you it's nothing to do with the famine. It's 1947. You can listen to the end and you'll see where the Black 47 came from. Got married in 47, but that's not the black bit. Yeah.
Well, Destiny had it for you that you were going to come down here to Tullamore. Well, how did all that happen?
Anyone happened to my sister. She's dead as well. She worked here in Tullamore, in Williams, in Danny Williams, that you just mentioned. Desmond, that wasn't Danny, but Desmond, probably his son at the time. She was doing parlour. She heard this job in Dermot Williams, in Tullamore Road, along Tullamore Road, and she got me a job as parlour. That's how I got in Flushing. So I was parlour maid in there, and I stayed in for a while. And I went from there to the back.
Oh, what were you doing as parlour maid?
Oh, just a uniform. Yeah. Just being there and there, set the table for 13 dogs at dinner parties in the evenings. 13 people, there'd be a few doctors and there. And there was a lovely doctor, he's dead now, Dr. Reilly. But they'd be there all around, and then they used to play bridge when the dinner party be over. But I had a uniform cap and a little white apron, and just go around serve with the clock and serve them.
Oh, was this in Desmond Williams's house now?
Yeah, no, this was Dermot Williams's.
Oh, Dermot Williams.
Along Main Road in front of, it was I could nearly show you the big house and had an underground in it as well.
Yeah.
And therefore we slept down underneath.
Yeah.
And
how many of you? How many?
10 men.
Yeah.
2 of us, a cook and a parliament. That's it.
Yourself and your sister?
No, my dad and another woman.
Oh, another, yeah.
No, my sister worked in the different in Williams in High Street.
Okay.
The brothers took over that big house, and you wouldn't know because you worked in front of them.
Yeah.
But the brothers took over that, and that's where she worked. And that's how I got the job in Tullamore, and I went to Salts. And I got married out of Salts.
And that's where you met this man here in John.
That's how I met him.
And that was in 1947?
Yeah. In October 1947, 29th of October.
Just after the war years.
That's it.
And that was a tough year.
That's sure. They only had everyone had an ounce of tea. Everyone was allowed an ounce of tea and very little and black bread. The flour was black. It made bread and everything. See, everyone got the diabetes from the black flour. It doesn't go with the war. But the whole of Ireland got the diabetes for a while and then it got used to the black bread. And when the white flour came back, everyone was thrilled to bits. It was so lovely to see the white flour back and the white loaf,
Yeah.
The bread was black to look at the flour, like it was kind of dark, dark brown, kind of blackish.
Tough times, weren't they? Tough times. Black bread, God help us all. Save us from the black bread and the diaries as well, definitely. Okay. Yeah.
The big freeze up. She can say about that, does she?
No, she doesn't mention that, no. But after that piece, it goes back to John talking again about his work, She used a lovely phrase, I got married out of Salts. Did you hear her saying that as well? I thought it was a great phrase. But her piece is really lovely. And she says when she didn't get that education, she said, I often think, what would I have been if I had gone on with my education? How much value she placed in it and didn't get that opportunity. And maybe she wouldn't have been a parlour maid. She might have been, might have got a job and so on like that. Ollie Clancy said, it's interesting some of the comments about the school. Ollie Clancy said, he was asked, why did you end up in Williams's? And he said, at the time you had a choice of Williams or Egan's or Salts or the Guards or the civil servants. And he said the quickest way to money was Williams, so that's where I went. They were the jobs at the time, you know. But all of those, it's amazing. It's amazing how much you learn about the town. I came to town. I actually came to town in 94, 95, so I'm just here 30 years. And a lot of the things they're talking about are all new to me. You heard Anne Martin talk about Untostal. I had to look that up. Do anybody here remember Untostal? Yes. It's a tradition that's gone completely. I think up in Leitrim they still do it. Drumshambo, yeah. But the Toastal was kind of, I don't know, a kind of celebration of Irish culture, wasn't it? A kind of little plays. And Anne Martin mentions coming in from Untostal. You know, the night her granny died, she talks, I was just in from an Untostal play. She mentions that. There are lots of little bits of history that we kind of learn from it, and lots of interesting things. It's amazing as well. Every time I had to look up something, if something was mentioned, like to do with, let's say, furlongs, or to do with certain things that I wasn't sure about, like Wakefields and so on. Every time I Googled them, the first thing that came up was Offaly History, a blog by Michael Byrne. It's amazing the amount of information that's in them, you know, all these blogs that he's writing, you know, a couple every week. And I was looking up about Wakefields, and sure enough, there was a thing about all the coffee shops and all the different shops in Tullamore. And there was the Capri Cafe, and all those were mentioned, and photographs of them. I was looking up about the furlongs, and there was a lovely piece about the furlongs. When I looked up about Sister Oliver, there was a lovely memory to her by Offaly History as well. So there's great contributions out there just by the society here and by the group here in terms of local history as well. From my own point of view, I say I've been in here since maybe January of last year, and the first thing I started doing, just calling in a day here and a day there, was trying to find where all the recordings were, and then just to try and find out what series were there. And I actually spoke to Maurice Keefe about some of the collections that were there as well, and he pointed me to the website. So when we were missing a catalogue or two, some of the catalogues I've made, the information is up on their website. So Irish Life in Lower is well worth a look, just to see all the recordings and all the Offaly collections that are there, and also to see the amount of recordings he did around Ireland. He did a huge amount of recording. Midlands 103 have a small number in their podcast section of some of Albert Fitzgerald's recordings. They're there as well. Not a lot. But I've spoken to 2 or 3 of the people in Midlands 103, and they have given me more recordings. So when I have them ready, at the moment we have about 25 to 30 of them. I'm hoping to get another 30 or 40, all to do with interviews. That one from Richard May and Emily O'Reilly now are recent ones. I just got off them and I haven't catalogued them yet. And we're speaking to Michael maybe about trying to get some of those very early recordings to put them up online so people can listen to them. The interview with Jim Kenny speaking to Pam Martin, the postman, about his time, that is up on SoundCloud. You can listen to that already. And I say the interviews that I've done with Sean and the interviews that I did with John Flanigan and with Joe Kenny, Sister Oliver, those ones from about 12, 15 years ago, they're all online. Stephen McNeil's one as well, worth a listen as well. Stephen talks about his life in Cork and all the jobs he did. He was in the bank and he moved to Abbeyleix, and from there he was in Crossmaglen, and he was in Mullingar, he was in Sligo, he was back in the Midlands again. So his journey is a very interesting story as well, and that's there that people can listen to it as well. Our hope now in the coming weeks and months is to record more. So if people have suggestions on the sheet that I've given you out tonight, my email address is there. So if you have any suggestions for people to be recorded, or if you want to be recorded yourself, or if you're someone who has an interest in making recordings, we can show you a little bit of that as well, or we can give you a little recorder to make the recording with somebody else, maybe a neighbour or somebody you know as well. I can take that recorder back off you then, and I can edit it. One of the things I use all the time, most of the things I use are all free. This one down here at the bottom corner, Audacity, is an audio editor. It edits all the pieces. So at the start of a recording, you can cut out the bits where you're saying, we're ready to record now, and you can cut all that out and you have a perfect interview at the end. That's a great piece of software. It's totally free. And the other one as well, a lot of people have asked me when I've shown those before, how do I make the videos that I made for tonight with the subtitles? So I'll just show you that just to finish off. It's a piece of software called Headliner. And Headliner, again, very kindly allow us to use that software free of charge a certain number of times a month, provided the piece that you're using is less than 10 minutes long. And a lot of people use little 3-minute snippets that they put up on Instagram or TikTok in the hope that people will go to SoundCloud to listen to the full interview. So it's like a promotion piece. But Headliner will allow you to use a certain amount, 3 or 4 of them every month. So over the last couple of months, I've been collecting these little bits and pieces together. You will notice little mistakes every now and again. It's very finicky. Doing the subtitling is very tricky. And if you go in and alter one, sometimes it messes up the timing and the sound and the words don't link together very well. So that can be a little bit thorny. And sometimes it'll only allow you to edit them a few times and you go back and you spot a mistake and it's too late to change it. So there are a few little anomalies with it, but it's a great piece of software and it's Headliner. And we learned about using Headliner down in Clare. Myself and Michael Dunn, who's here tonight with me, and Sean attended a course with a group called Queen of Unclore, Clare Memories. And they have a fantastic resource down there in Ennis. And we were dealing with a lady called Paula Carl, who's also a broadcaster on Clare FM. And she showed us all these little techniques with Audacity and with Headliner for making these little videos. So that's where we learned about it. They're doing terrific work at the moment as well. So that's kind of where we're at the moment, about a year and a half into oral histories. Anybody got any questions just before we finish up? I'm conscious of the time. We're at 9:25. We're supposed to finish at 9 o'clock. Question, yeah.
Wondering about the format of the earliest or oldest recordings. Was it like reel-to-reel stuff?
That I'm not sure of, because when I came in, they were already digitized. So I never saw the original recordings. But I'm guessing from some people, one person came in with a piece and it was done on a small little handheld recorder, tape recorder. And it is possible to take those. If people have some old tape recordings, and if there's a headphone socket on it, I can take the sound off that. I did that with the Cecilia Warren, the Josephine Warren one, when she was talking about Tay Lane. That was about a 15-minute piece, and I was able to record that off her machine. So any of those things, they're all transferable.